Now, it's time to move on to something more substantial. My rosemary, blue cheese, and fig tart, well, it's the perfect ending to an elegant dinner party. It's got savory and sweet. So I'm going to start with the crust that has a little bit of sweet, but a whole lot of savory. First thing, I need to measure 1 1/3 cups of all-purpose flour into a bowl. And I'm working in some Parmesan cheese, and that's 1/3 cup. Just a touch of sugar, a tablespoon, and for flavoring, I've got a tablespoon of chopped fresh rosemary. Now, a little lemon zest. I think the lemon works as a nice bridge to bring savory elements onto the sweet side. I have 10 tablespoons of butter, and this is ice cold. It's unsalted butter. It helps to make a crust that is tender, a little bit flaky, and that holds that creamy blue cheese filling. Go. Now I'll use my pastry cutter and just work this in. I'm just looking for a generally even, rough, crumbly texture. But it's okay if you still see bits of butter. There we go. Now I'll add 3 tablespoons of cold water. And I just want to barely bring the dough together. I prefer to finish up shaping it by hand on my work surface. There we go. Just a little bit of warmth from my hands will help bring it together, and I can kind of flatten and fold it as I go. And that builds in some extra flakiness. There we go. It's softened up just the right amount. And I'll wrap up my dough because it needs to chill for 2 hours, just to set up that butter. And after it's had that time to chill, it's ready to roll. Got a little extra flour here. Put it on my dough. And I'm using my rectangular pan with a removable bottom, and I like to sprinkle a little flour on the bottom. I need the dough to line the sides and bottom. All right, this handles well. Lift it up and over. Make sure you press it well into the corners and up the fluted edges. Fold them back a bit. Give this a nice, tidy little trim. Now, because I've softened the butter within this pastry, rolling it, I need to chill it down again. But it only takes 30 minutes this time. And once it's chilled, it's ready to bake. I've preheated my oven to 375, and so that I don't get any bubbles forming in the bottom of the pastry shell, I dock the bottom with a fork. And this style of pastry needs to be blind baked. And that means you have to cover it with foil. The foil makes it easy for me to spoon in and remove my dried beans that I'm using as a weight. It's basically like a false filling. That way, as the tart shell bakes, it holds its shape. Then I remove the foil and the beans at the same time and finish baking it. The reason you blind bake is because the crust takes longer to bake than the filling, and I want to make sure it's nice and crisp, so it gets its own time in the oven. Now that this is full, I pop it in the oven, and I give it 20 minutes with the foil and the beans in place. Then I lift up the foil and beans, and I let it finish baking for about 8 minutes more, until you see that the bottom of the crust is dry. Once it's cooled, it's ready to be filled. The filling for this tart is creamy and cheesy and rich. I'm starting off with a baking staple, cream cheese, half a package, so that means 4 ounces, that I'm just going to stir a little bit to soften up. I do favor a creamy style of blue cheese, 6 ounces, like a Roquefort or Gorgonzola. I'll just stir that in a second. Now I'll stir in 2 tablespoons of chopped fresh chives, and for the sweetness, 2 tablespoons of honey. Honey is a great complement when it comes to cheese. Now I'll add an egg yolk. And the other half of that lemon I zested. The lemon here lightens up the strength of the blue cheese. All right, now this is ready to spoon into my cooled tart shell. Okay, this is ready to go back in the oven, but this time at 350, and it only takes 20 minutes. You won't see a dramatic change in the filling, but once it's set, oh, it's just so beautiful and it slices so easily. A black pepper hazelnut brittle will make the perfect sweet contrast for my blue cheese tart. And it's pretty easy to make. And I'm going to start by adding 2 tablespoons of water to my pot. And now I need 3/4 of a cup of sugar. I'm gonna get crazy here and measure 3/4 into my larger cup. I also need a 1/4 cup of white corn syrup. I like to use white corn syrup as opposed to golden corn syrup. If you use golden, it's hard to tell when you actually reach full caramelization. So I prefer the white, the clear corn syrup. Now I'm going to bring this up to a boil on high heat and not stir it. But the one thing I will do as it boils is brush the sides of the pot occasionally with a little water, just to make sure it's clear of splatters. That way I know my sugar will stay liquefied. I'm just starting to show signs of amber color, but it really is a matter of seconds from when it starts to color to when you hit full caramel. Right now. I've turned off the heat and I add my tablespoon of butter and have a spatula on hand because the minute you add your baking soda, woo! It froths up. Now I'll stir in my hazelnuts, a cup of whole hazelnuts that have been roasted and peeled. And you want to quickly get to a parchment-lined baking tray. And spread out those hazelnuts as much as you can. Oh, that smells so good. Beautiful. And before the brittle sets completely, I want to put a pinch of sea salt on and some black pepper. Truly a sweet and savory combo. And I have one here that's already cooled, but before I chop it up, I need to put the figs on my tart. Here is my chilled blue cheese tart. Now it's ready for some fresh figs. And I just cut these into quarters and arrange them on top. It really depends on the size of your figs, how many it will take, anywhere from 12 to 15. There we go. Now, just arrange these on top of the tart. There we go. Doesn't that make a statement? The finishing touch, a bit of the chopped hazelnut brittle. I break a few pieces, and I actually go with the thicker part, because that way I'll get a nice mix of the hazelnut and the sweetness in there. A little crumbling, and there you have it. Now this is a tart that I would present to the table just like this and pass it around to let people cut off how much they'd like. The perfect storm of savory and sweet.